Before Google Maps, before paper charts, before the compass even existed, how did humanity find its way? The answer is simpler and far more profound than you might think. We didn't need to invent maps because, in a way, the world was the map. Early humans learned to read the earth and sky like a book, where every chapter heading was written by the sun and every footnote was carved by the wind. They were the original wayfinders, using an orchestra of natural cues to navigate not just their lands, but entire oceans. One of the most fundamental tools was right above their heads. Celestial navigation was humanity's first GPS. At night, the stars provided an unwavering, predictable guide. The North Star, Polaris, became the anchor of the Northern Hemisphere, a fixed point around which everything else revolved. Finding it meant finding true north, and from there, every other direction fell into place. Travelers and sailors would track constellations as they wheeled across the sky, turning the cosmos into a reliable clock and compass. Nowhere was this art more refined than in the Pacific. Polynesian wayfinding is a masterclass in reading the subtle language of the ocean. These navigators crossed thousands of miles of open water in canoes with no instruments. How? They memorized star paths, the specific points on the horizon where stars would rise and set. But they didn't just look up, they looked down and around. They could feel the direction of ocean swells, the deep, consistent pulses of water that travel for thousands of miles. They read these swells like a modern driver reads highway lanes, subtle, invisible, but perfectly consistent. This, combined with reading cloud patterns and bird flight, allowed them to pinpoint tiny islands in the vastness of the Pacific. Closer to shore, other senses came into play. Mariners approaching land could often smell it before they saw it. Changes in wind direction and the distinct scent of damp earth, pollen, or coastal vegetation carried for miles over the sea, acting as an olfactory beacon. It was nature's way of saying, "Welcome, land is near." The creatures of the sky also served as guides. Bird observation was a critical skill. The direction and timing of bird flights, especially those of seabirds, were dead giveaways. A flock of terns heading purposefully in one direction at dusk wasn't just a random event. It was a living arrow pointing directly to their nesting grounds on a nearby island. For a sailor lost at sea, such a sight was a promise of survival. The water itself told a story. The behavior of tides, the patterns of foam on the water's surface, and the way waves refracted and broke all contained vital information. An experienced navigator could interpret these signs to understand the shape of an unseen coastline, identify hidden reefs, or find safe passages into a harbor. The ocean wrote its own warnings and invitations. Even the moon, often overshadowed by the sun and stars, played its part. Lunar navigation was another tool in the ancient arsenal. The phases of the moon and its position in the sky helped in estimating time and direction, especially when clouds obscured the stars. It was a secondary but still reliable celestial guide. Back on land, navigation was about memory and permanence. Natural landmarks, like a uniquely shaped mountain, a giant ancient tree, or a peculiar rock formation, served as long-term navigational markers. These weren't just points of interest, they were anchors in the mental map of a region, passed down through generations. Sometimes humans added their own, creating cairns or stone piles to mark a trail where nature hadn't. Our four-legged companions also blazed the trails. Hunters and nomads quickly learned that animals knew the land best. Following animal trails was a common practice. These well-trodden paths, created by generations of migrating herds, often led to water sources, safe mountain passes, and fertile valleys. In time, many of these animal routes became the first human highways. And speaking of highways, rivers were the original superhighways. They offered a clear, consistent path through even the most bewildering landscapes. Following a river downstream almost always led to the coast or a larger settlement. Following it upstream led deep into the heart of a territory. For trade, exploration, and settlement, rivers were the lifelines of the ancient world. In high terrain, survival depended on knowing the mountains. Travelers memorized mountain passes, the natural gateways through impassable ranges. They learned to read the seasonal snowmelt, which could indicate the safety and accessibility of a route. A familiar notch in a ridgeline was more reassuring than any signpost, a silent promise of safe passage. Of course, the most dominant feature of our sky, the sun, was the ultimate daily guide. By observing the sun's position and the length and direction of shadows, anyone could determine their orientation. A simple stick pushed into the ground becomes a sundial, a shadow clock. The shortest shadow marks midday and points directly north or south. It's a beautifully simple yet profoundly effective technique. The plant kingdom also offered its own subtle clues. Vegetation patterns could reveal cardinal directions. For example, in the northern hemisphere, moss often grows more thickly on the north-facing sides of trees and rocks, where there is less direct sunlight and more moisture. It's a small detail, but for a lost traveler, it's a compass provided by nature itself. The weather itself was a map. Experienced wayfinders developed a deep knowledge of cloud formations and prevailing wind systems. They could read the sky to predict not just a coming storm, but also to confirm their general location and direction of travel. Certain clouds form over land while others are unique to the open sea. The wind was a constant, whispering companion, its direction a steady guide. In the vast, shifting landscapes of the desert, navigation required a different set of skills. Desert travelers learned to read the sand itself. The shape and orientation of dunes, known as ergs, are sculpted by prevailing winds. The smaller ripples on the sand surface also align with the wind, providing a directional clue even on a calm day. For the Tuareg and other desert nomads, the sand was a dynamic, ever-changing map. When vision was limited by distance or terrain, ancient peoples used smoke and fire signals. A column of smoke rising from a distant hill during the day, or the glow of a fire at night, served as a beacon. These signals could communicate presence, mark a location, or transmit a message, creating a network of communication and navigation across vast landscapes. But what if the landmarks were gone, the sky was cloudy, and the trail disappeared? Then you turn inward to the map held in memory. Many cultures developed oral mapping. Routes, landmarks, and dangers were encoded into songs, poems, and epic chants. This wasn't just folklore, it was a practical mnemonic device to preserve and transmit precise geographical information. A navigator could sing their way across an ocean or a desert, with each verse representing a leg of the journey. Sometimes these memory maps were etched in stone. Rock art and symbols or petroglyphs weren't always just decorative. They often marked important paths, the location of a hidden spring, a good hunting ground, or a warning about a dangerous area. These carvings were permanent signposts along ancient routes, a message from the past to the future traveler. Back at sea, there was another invisible force at play: ocean currents. Just like the great wind systems, the oceans have their own powerful, consistent currents. Early sailors who learned the patterns of these currents could use them like marine conveyor belts, drastically speeding up their journeys and ensuring they stayed on course. Understanding currents like the Gulf Stream or the Kuroshio was key to efficient long-distance sea travel. Finally, we arrive at the most enchanting form of navigation: mythic geography. The myths and legends of a culture often seem like pure fantasy, but many contain encoded navigational and geographical truths. Stories of gods creating mountains or heroes battling sea monsters could secretly describe real landmarks and oceanic hazards. The legend becomes a practical travel guide, where the path to a mythical land is also the real-world route to a trading partner. In this way, storytelling itself became the ultimate act of map-making. So, the next time your GPS fails, remember this: For millennia, we navigated with our senses, our wits, and our deep connection to the world around us. We read the stars, listened to the wind, and followed the stories whispered by the land and sea. We didn't need a map on a screen because we knew how to read the world itself. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found these ancient techniques as fascinating as I do, consider liking this video and subscribing for more explorations into forgotten wisdom. See you next time.